Hi, I'm Dr. Rob Brander from the University of New South Wales. I'm a surf scientist. And at the university, we study beach hazards and also how to avoid them. And what I'm going to share with you today is the top 5 tips going into the summer. One of the main hazards are waves. Obviously, when you go in the water, you're going to encounter waves. And sometimes waves break quite powerfully by curling over and plunging down on the beach face. And that's called a plunging wave. Plunging waves, or dumpers as we call them, are the leading cause of spinal injuries on our beaches. If you encounter a plunging wave, you have to be very, very careful. You should never body surf them with your arms behind your back. You should always have your arms out in front, so if you go over, you hit your arms and not your head. Another type of breaking wave that you should watch out for is what we call surging waves, or sneaky waves. And these waves don't curl over and plunge. They just sort of bulge up at the shoreline, and when they break, they rush up the beach or they surge really fast. And it might not look dangerous, but that surge can easily knock people over. It can knock over little kids, it can knock over older people, and then they can get in all sorts of trouble and start rolling back underneath the wave itself. So you should never turn your back on the ocean and always respect what the waves are doing. Swimming between the red and yellow flags is really, really important. I can't emphasize enough just how important it is, because the flags are set up away from the rip currents. And rip currents are by far the biggest hazard that you're ever going to face on a beach. There's about 17,000 rips operating on Australian beaches at any given time, and if you're swimming outside of the flags, there's a good chance you're going to get caught in one.
Well, what are rips? It's a really good question. Rips are strong, narrow currents that flow from the shoreline through the surf zone and offshore. They exist to take all the breaking water that's piling up on the beach back out to sea.
The best way to spot a rip is to look for dark gaps. Right behind me, we've got a nice rip. It looks like a dark gap, almost like a road or a path going through the surf. Now over here, it's a shallow sandbar. The waves are breaking. All that white water is piling up on the beach, starts flowing along the beach in this deeper channel, and then turns the corner, and that's your rip. And that's what you look for, dark gaps. It's a pretty scary experience getting stuck in a rip, and there's definitely some do's and don'ts about how you should behave if you do find yourself caught in one. The main thing is not to panic. Don't panic, because the rip will not pull you under the water. All the rip will do will take you further out to sea, and it'll sometimes bring you back. Remember that you've got air in your lungs, you float, you're very buoyant, so don't panic. The second thing to do is, if you're not a particularly good swimmer, put your hand up, straight up like that, signals for the lifeguards and the lifesavers to come and get you. One hazard that almost everyone who goes in the water is likely to face is the presence of jellyfish. Now, jellyfish come in different forms, and not all of them sting you, but some do. Now, in Southeast Australia, we tend to get what are called blue bottles. So this is typically what a small blue bottle looks like. And the upper part is sort of the bubblegum part, and you can actually touch it. It's quite harmless. But the tentacles that are lying underneath, which can go for quite a ways, that's what stings. That's what gets wrapped around your arms and your legs. And you don't want to touch them at all. Even on the beach, if you stand on those tentacles, you can get stung a little bit. So if you see them on the beach, chances are they're in the water, and just pay attention. If you get stung by a blue bottle, there's not much you can do. It's going to hurt a lot for about an hour and a half. The best thing to do is rinse off any remnant tentacles with warm water, and that's about it. Grin and bear it. Of course, going to the beach isn't always about the beach itself and going in the water. A lot of it is about rocks, because all of our beaches are surrounded by rock headlands, rock cliffs, and we have what I'm standing on now, which is a real wide rock platform. And all of our coastline is surrounded by this, and it's all very accessible, and it can also be very, very dangerous. It's nice to come down to the platforms at low tide and look in the tide pools, but you're very close to the ocean. And rocks are exposed to high waves. They're also very slippery. And if you slip and fall in the water, it's very hard to get back out because there's a lot of turbulence in that area. And for that reason, rock fishing is Australia's most dangerous sport. About 15 people a year drown while rock fishing. They get washed in and they can't get back out. Aside from that, if ever you jump in the water or you dive from a high point, you have to make sure you absolutely know what's in the water. If there's any hidden rocks and you hit them, you could be in a lot of trouble, and they don't call it tombstoning for nothing. So we've just covered some of the basic hazards you're likely to encounter, but don't be put off by going to the beach. The beach is a special place. We've got the best beaches in the world. You really need to get out there. All it really takes is a little bit of common sense. Always swim between the red and yellow flags. Always check it out before you go out. And look around and talk to people. Are there any jellyfish in the water? You'll quickly find out. And if you use those rules, you'll have a great time at the beach.
How do you convince people of the value of research? Well, being able to describe it well yourself is a pretty good start. That's the aim of a 3-minute thesis competition among students from the University of New South Wales. The best and brightest from across UNSW are pitching their research to a general audience.
Are you feeling nervous?
It should be alright. We'll see how it goes.
What about yourself?
Yeah, not going to lie about that.
Judges from the media and academia are scoring the students on language and presentation skills, as well as that all-important ability to watch the clock.
And I've run out of time. Thank you very much.
But these recent floods may be part of the natural climate cycle.
I looked at close to
His delivery style, the communication style, I thought was the best because it was measured and paced and had appropriate breaks in it.
It did seem, the worry is that it almost trivialises the research that he was doing.
The winner will go on to compete against students from 30 universities from Australia, New Zealand and Fiji. And here's the one who did it best.
Good afternoon, my name is Alex Jordan. I'm from the Evolution and Ecology Research Centre here at UNSW, and today I'm going to talk to you about the lifetime costs of male reproductive effort. Why isn't the world a more promiscuous place? You see, natural selection, which is the process that drives evolution, is effectively a measure of how many offspring you leave behind in subsequent generations. The more offspring you have, the better your evolutionary prospects. Now, for a male, maximising the number of offspring you have means maximising the number of sexual partners you have. So if the rule is simply the more the better, what's preventing the evolution of hyper-promiscuous males? To answer this, I looked at whether there are physical costs of male sexual effort that might limit the evolution of promiscuity. And I did so using a vertebrate model system, the guppy. Over the course of their lives, I kept males either with a single female, which I called the married treatment, or with a series of unfamiliar females that I replaced every 2 weeks, which I called the Tiger Woods treatment. Over the course of their lives, I measured a range of behavioural and physiological traits to determine the costs of a lifetime of promiscuity. Not surprisingly, I found that promiscuous males had a much higher overall sexual effort, but they paid dearly for it. In fact, my promiscuous males spent so much time pursuing females that they neglected other essential life tasks, including looking for food. Over the course of their lives, the costs were greater still. Promiscuous males grew more slowly, grew to a smaller adult size, and also tended to die sooner. In contrast, my married males ate regularly, grew steadily throughout their lives, and also tended to live longer. So in the long run, although my promiscuous males may have maximised their short-term evolutionary success, in the end of the day, they ended up hungry, skinny, and dead. These results are some of the first evidence of a physiological cost of male sexual effort in a vertebrate, and they also demonstrate a natural limitation on the evolution of promiscuity. They might also provide a warning to any among us who would wish for a more promiscuous existence. Thank you.
Look, I really enjoy communicating my research, and obviously I have a pretty easy topic to talk about, which makes it that much more comfortable. And so overall, I think I wasn't particularly nervous. I think I did stumble a little, but perhaps it didn't come through. No, I had a really enjoyable experience.
October 31st, 2011. That's the day the world is expected to reach 7 billion people. At least that's the projection of the United Nations Fund for Population Activities. What does a world of 7 billion plus mean for people and the planet? What new pressures will Australia face? How will it be changed? And what kind of world will our children grow up in? 7 UNSW experts canvassed the big issues.
Firstly, in the developed world, we have people now, which we didn't have in earlier eras, living to 80, 90 or 100. And people at that age accumulate a lot of chronic illness and disease. That requires a massive health system devoted to this. And the cost is very large. In developing countries, about half the world's population lives on $2.50 a day or less. There's grinding poverty for 900 million people. 27,000 children die each day of poverty. 10 million a year.
All countries in the world will face the challenge of population ageing. It's happening everywhere. In Australia, though, we're fortunate because many countries are older than we are. Relative to countries like Germany or Japan or Italy, Australia's a teenager.
More people means a greater demand on resources and opportunities and on wealth. It means more people trying to get somewhere to meet their aspirations. To get there, we need order, we need civility, and unfortunately, it means more regulation and more law. And that, of course, means more lawyers. So a glimpse of Australia's future is, for better or for worse, far more regulation, more regulatory authorities and institutions, and a greater impact on the way we behave with each other, determined by law.
Access to fresh water in Australia, driest inhabited continent, is incredibly difficult, and we're seeing the impacts of overuse of water resources, particularly in places like the Murray-Darling Basin, and that sort of pressure is only going to increase as Australia's population increases, but obviously as the world's population increases.
Australia is already a net importer of food. Only 6% of Australia's total land area is arable, so you're able to grow food on it. To dam northern Australia to increase food production is probably not the best strategy. I think it would be far quicker and far more efficient to develop what Australian cities are already doing at very local levels, which is urban food production.
As the population approaches 7 billion people, it means that all of our waste products are also growing. And one of those waste products is carbon dioxide. The pollutants that we're putting in are going to take hundreds of thousands of years to be cleansed away by natural processes. And what we're putting into the atmosphere really constitutes an unprecedented experiment with our planet that is going to lead to changes that haven't been seen in millions of years.
Our sunshine alone is enough to power all the energy demands of our country as it is at the moment and well into the future. We have potential not only to export the actual energy itself, but to export the technology for collecting and converting energy as well from renewable reserves. So we have an abundance to power ourselves and the potential to help power the rest of the world.
We can't solve the 7 billion problem overnight, but surely we can be doing better for our cousins, brothers and sisters in the third world. That would be my plea.
It's not your typical image of rural Australia. There's no cattle mustering, no combine harvesters, and the local dam doesn't have a nice right-hand brake like this. But if all goes well, this surfer will one day make an invaluable contribution to rural life. Ty Clayworth is a third-year medicine student at the Port Macquarie campus of the UNSW Rural Clinical School.
When I found out that you had the option after 3 years to study in Port Macquarie as one of the rural campuses, and I knew that I always saw myself going back to a rural area, so that's why I chose Port.
As an Indigenous rural student, Ty is exactly the potential medical professional country Australia needs.
Australia has enough doctors. However, there's a maldistribution of doctors, and the maldistribution is distinctly urban-based, which leaves rural and regional Australia wanting.
Port Macquarie is one of 5 UNSW campuses across the state. Initially offering a few short placements, the campus now takes 40 full-time students a year.
They will do all their clinical work, their research year, and their didactic teaching here. And at the end of it all, they'll be examined here in Port and graduate. And they graduate from University of New South Wales.
One of those heading for graduation is Shannon Knott. He's so passionate about getting medical professionals out to the country, he brings them back to his place. His Rural Appreciation Weekends host 150 health and medicine students every year.
What I thought, well, we'll bring the city kids to the bush, to my parents' property in Dunedoo, and give them an experience that actually, I suppose, simulates what it's like living in rural Australia, as well as working in rural Australia as well. Learning how farmers shear sheep and seeing sheep and cattle property run, through to more practical things like snakebite and venomation.
Start at the fingertips and toes of the affected limb.
It's about giving people early on in their degrees this positive experience so that later on, when they do have access to going to things such as rural clinical schools, to be able to allow students to realise that, okay, going to a rural and remote setting in the first place is going to be a positive for me, my own work-life balance, and also for your learning.
For Ty, that means getting hands-on experience in a close-knit community.
It's been good with my supervisor, Dr. Prowse, to have an opportunity to go into his rooms and see some patients with him and just to kind of get more of a feel about what medicine will actually be like.
Yeah, so it may not do anything for his back. Up here they actually see there's a big need for doctors in the country, so they actually are very keen to actually see students and actually show them their problem and talk about their problem to give the students some insight.
Once kids get out and try it here, they see that there are different aspects. There's a much more hands-on aspect. There's a much more close interaction with the community and the patient in the community in the rural areas, and it's a pretty rewarding experience.
For some students, life in Port proves to be addictive. Bronwyn Orr planned to stay 9 months. Now a graduate, she's not heading back to Sydney anytime soon.
It takes me 5 minutes to get to work and 5 minutes to get home. So even if I've had a really busy day, I can be home and at the beach within 10 minutes.
I really like the small kind of community feel that we get here, and like with everyone at the campus, there's only about 40 people there, so you kind of know everyone.
If you've got a chance to go into a rural or remote or regional setting, I would say take it with both hands, because the training that you get there, as well as the sort of work-life balance, the social aspects of it, is absolutely amazing.
I'm not going to rule out like the city, but I definitely see myself settling down in the country.
again, changes in the weather are used to argue for or against climate change. But the fact is, weather doesn't equal climate. Every day at any given place, you have weather. Only over extended periods of time can you characterize a region's climate. Climate is always changing. That's natural. You can't make an argument about climate change based on one day's, one week's, or even one season's weather. Weather, however, is a symptom of the climate's health. When the climate gets sick, you'll see more symptoms in the form of frequent extreme weather events, such as heat waves and deluges. Human-made climate change is the problem. Our activities are accelerating the rate at which climate change is happening. A 2-degree hike in global average temperature over time is considered dangerous. Temperature has increased 0.8 degrees Celsius since the Industrial Revolution. Greenhouse gases already in the atmosphere will almost certainly double that increase. It's like your own body temperature. Our normal temperatures hover around 37 degrees. Add 2 or 3 more degrees and your body starts to struggle. Small changes can have huge consequences because the body, like the climate, is a very complex system. Here's a list of weather symptoms that suggest the climate has a fever. You'll see a persistent pattern of more intense windstorms, droughts, more deluges and floods, and heat waves. Pre-existing trends get exacerbated and then new maladies occur. Dry areas can get drier, wet areas can get wetter. Or dry areas suddenly get wet and wet areas start to dry up. A system that's normally in balance gets tipped out of balance. Things escalate from there. A body can normally heal itself, but the question is, can the climate heal itself? So the next time someone wants to argue about climate change based on their weather observations, ask them what's happened over the last 25 years. That's how many years of data scientists need to establish climate change patterns.
It's an approach to doing data analysis or doing churning through a lot of data in a very quick way.
Most research is limited by the ability to orient yourself in a large field of data. So you can think of it as like navigating on a map. It's very easy to get lost, and you've got to try to find out, well, what do those peaks over there actually mean? And am I really in a valley, or is it, am I just leading myself down a plateau? It's very difficult to figure out the morphology, the shape of things. We've come up with a way to orient yourself without having to look at or search for those landmarks. It's a kind of like a GPS for data, or a GPS for the solutions.
I am a microbiologist and an oceanographer, and I deal with large, complex oceanographic data and try to integrate the biology within the physical and chemical environment within the ocean. Once we have an unknown gene collected from the ocean, or even from a cancer patient, we won't have to search through this complex array of solution. We'll be able to locate where it's placed in this complex array of solution pretty much instantaneously. Well, I'm very challenged in my job because to run most of this genetic data through the largest supercomputers here in Australia can take weeks or even months using something like BLAST. One day, just by chance, through a common friend, I met Peter. And Peter was instrumental in changing my view of how it's not that I have to find bigger computers, but I just have to find a better solution. And that's how PASTE came around. For most genes out in the environment, we have absolutely no knowledge of what they're doing and why they are there. What do organisms use genes for? That's true from going from a simple microbe going up to humans. Most genes that we know have no known function to us. A technology such as PASTE will allow us to do these searches a lot quicker. So it will cut down the time. So basically what we're trying to do is having a way of navigating through this huge amount of information in a much quicker and much more efficient way. We'll have more information out of it too. So we are predicting that this technology will allow to discover new gene functions that are still not there.
As far as we know, no one has tried to fund science this way.
It might seem like a lot to invest just in a new technical approach, but the reality is, when you think about the benefits that might come up from speeding up bioinformatics and speeding up research, not only for climate change and oceanography, but also for infectious diseases or cancer research, well, one can see the benefits straight away.
We intend that the results we publish are things that can be validated scientifically in the usual ways. So it's something where we're trying a different model of funding, but we're not jumping off into la-la land.
Our approach will hopefully allow researchers to do on their own PC what is currently done on big supercomputers